thank you so much to all of you that came out on this cold morning to attend this event. I've got tears in my eyes looking out at all these people, all these community leaders that are here. Thank you very much. A couple of things I want to mention. We did run out of coffee cups. We're going to get more, so if you haven't, okay, we do have more cups now, so if you want to go get coffee. I'd also like to mention that bathrooms are out here and to that corner. Please feel free to get up at any time that you want to go get coffee or take care of things. And I'd also like to mention that the Historical Society, Kathy Case and members of the Historical Society have put together a great table here of pictures, newspaper articles, mementos from the period of time that we are talking about. So please take an opportunity to look at that at any point in the meeting today. Shortly after Roy Terwilliger retired from the bank in January, end of December, I ran into Kathy Hockedal and Jeannie Zita, and Kathy particularly had that kind of sparkle in her eyes that tells you that she wants to get something organized. So Jeannie and Kathy and I got this event organized, and I want to thank both of them. They're a pleasure to work with. They're extraordinary volunteers and great community leaders. So thank you to them. I want to thank our city manager, Rick Getcho, who I channeled information to, and he made everything happen in terms of facilities. And again, I want to thank Kathy Case. Roy has been recognized as a pillar of this community and a volunteer extraordinary since about 1974, when he opened a bank in the city. And at that time, the city was about 7,000 people. He helped to found the Eden Prairie Foundation, the Eden Prairie Chamber of Commerce, the Eden Prairie Crime Fund, and the Eden Prairie Rotary, and served as president of many of those organizations. He also served as state senator representing Eden Prairie from 1992 to 2002, and he also served as chair of the Metropolitan Sports Facilities Commission. But his greatest impact is to the community leaders that he mentored and inspired with his demonstration of honesty, humility, and devotion to the community. And when I say all that, I have to also mention that in the early days, many people in Eden Prairie did not know that Roy didn't even live in Eden Prairie. Roy has been a resident of Edina, never has lived in Eden Prairie, but has had his bank here, and obviously a lot of his heart here. Many of us have heard Roy speak and recite a poem that he loves to recite about builders and wreckers. All of you here in the audience, I know many of you, you are all builders. But this wonderful poem, I don't know if you're planning to recite it today, but it's really struck me that it just epitomizes the kind of man that Roy is, and also the people that he is going to be introducing later, or right now, who are on the panel. They're all builders. So thank you very much for coming. I hope you enjoy this event. We're going to go until about 8:30, 8:40. Then we'll have a break. You can get more coffee. People that need to leave at that point are welcome to leave. And then we'll move people forward and have a little bit more of an informal question and answer discussion period, sharing, whatever we want to do. So thank you all for coming today.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and thank you for those nice comments, and I'm humbled when you say that, and slightly embarrassed, so thank you for that. I guess as Winston Churchill once said when someone asked him about somebody, who they said was, he was a very humble person, said, well, he's got a lot to be humble about. So. Anyway, I'd like to ask if, at this time, if we could have the panelists going to join me come up here. Dean Edstrom, who was on the city council in the mid-'70s, went from being a boy who pedaled his bike around Glen Lake and such out to Glencoe, and then came back here years later after being in New York and Paris and getting his law degree and practicing law. And Dean was on the city council and a very big person as far as getting the Eden Prairie Rotary Club, original Rotary Club, organized. Not the noon club, the morning club. So next to him is, you've already heard, Pastor Rod Anderson. Pastor Rod moved here in 77 and he was the first called pastor to St. Andrew Lutheran Church, and that church at that time had about 125 people, 117 people, I think, in 25 families. And of course, St. Andrew Lutheran Church has grown to be quite a sizable organization, like a lot of the other fellow churches in Eden Prairie. And Rod has been very active in many things as well. On the left, the extreme left, not politically necessarily.
Boy, I got slammed already.
Be Dave Anderson, and Dave, you'll know him if you've gone to any hockey games or any events in town where there's the booster clubs have been there, whether it be getting hot dogs to the old football stadium or watching that guy who keeps time and keeps order at the hockey games to, you name it. Dave and his wife Jeannie have lived here since 1974, and he's been involved in many different things. There's been a constant, was a constant help to me when Mayor Lukens mentioned that I did serve in political office. The reason I was able to do that is because David was the treasurer of everything that, every campaign fund that we had, and so I owe a great deal of gratitude to him. And on right to him, right next to him, named Jerry. As a guy who really needs no introduction, he's a very bashful guy. You probably, if you haven't been around me, you maybe haven't, met him. Jerry McCoy, Jerry and his family moved here from Burnsville, actually from Richfield, and he was assistant superintendent at Burnsville, and moved here and right at the time that the Eden Prairie school system was about to have a strike, as I remember, and a few other things. And so Jerry was involved, of course, obviously in the schools from those early days, actually not as early as Kurt Conady in Mary in the schools, but Jerry was the superintendent here until the late 90s. Did a wonderful job. A lot of building projects came along during that time, a lot of planning, all of which these guys will tell you about. The plan here is to kind of talk early reflections about Eden Prairie, and kind of go through, and I'm going to kind of go in the order that we're seated here. I'm going to ask Rod to start, and then Dean, and they'll kind of cover different areas, and then we'll skip over here to Jerry and Dave, and we'll take from there. And the mayor mentioned various organizations, and the only thing I can say is that I was at the scene of these organizations, many of them being started, and was lucky enough to be involved, but there were so many people, many of you, who were likewise involved. And so this community has been built as a team. People have been, like Pastor Rod said in his prayer, standing on shoulders of people who've come before, and there's so many people who've provided leadership, and so many organizations that have provided leadership in this community, that to mention one person, you run the risk of not recognizing someone else who should be mentioned. So it really is kind of an admirable chore for us this morning to be able to be up here and talk about Eden Prairie and how it really did come together as a team, and how many of you were involved, and many of the people up here were involved with you. And so this isn't about us, it's about the whole community. And I'm going to hand it over now to Pastor Rod.
Well, good morning. And I see the two of us up here have Helen Holden Anderson's book in front of us, The First 100 Years of Eden Prairie. And what we're doing today is we're reflecting on a good portion of the 50 years that followed that, and what would then lead us up to kind of near the sesquicentennial of this town, or at least of these rememberings. And I want to capture one thought first at the beginning. I should also say I also have Marie Wittenberg's history book up here, and I just learned from Jerry over here that she's in a nursing home environment in Shakopee. I didn't know that, so I'm a little picking up information myself today. Something that defined what the church is: a destination church and a local church. One day I received a call at my office from Bishop Herb Chilstrom. He was reading, he said, some of the Minnesota Pioneer Church history. And he asked if I had seen the story about that Anderson pioneer family that came to Eden Prairie and homesteaded. And on the first Sunday, they walked 6 miles carrying their baby to find the nearest Presbyterian church, which they learned was at Oak Grove. That would be Oak Grove Presbyterian Church. That would be Old Shakopee Road, which was known then as the Fort Snelling to Chaska Road, Penn Avenue in Bloomington. And they walked because they didn't have a horse and carriage. Only an oxen and an ox cart, a screech cart. Those were ox carts with wood wheels and wood axles, so they rubbed on each other. They were called screech carts, and it would be unacceptable, especially for a Presbyterian, to show up at church with an ox cart. So they walked the 6 miles, and on the way back, the wife and mother said, Dad, do you suppose it would be possible that next week we take the ox cart 5 miles, tie the ox into the woods, walk to the church building, and then go home in the same way? And the bishop asked, he said, do you know this Anderson family? I said, Herb, I think we just relocated St. Andrew Church onto their farmstead. And one of them is sitting over here today, the ancestors that went before. 150 years ago, a not so local church was a destination church, and this story is the story of a smart wife of a too proud Presbyterian, I think. But so there had been, by the time I came to town, preaching for nearly 100 years on Prairie and in the village. When we came in 77. First, the historic churches, Presbyterian and Methodist. Pastor Eudston was the senior pastor in town at the time. He was the longtime Presbyterian pastor. Pastor Alden Kasky was at the Methodist church. They had relocated a number of times. In 1961, Emmanuel came. Pastor Gary Peterson was pastor then. He later became the mayor, along with his associate at the time, Jim Barth, who served in Eden Prairie. And everybody worked together to make room then for new churches that were arriving, especially the schools made it all possible and rented their spaces. Now, St. Andrew's story is kind of like a Palm Sunday parade that leads through town for these many years. We started out in the Edenvale Golf Course Clubhouse. The first meetings were there. Then the old Central Middle School cafeteria for worship. Then the Shadow Green Apartments community room, because the schools got shut down in the cold of the energy crunch in the mid-70s, and they were closed for the weekends. You could not come and use the schools during that time. So we were in this small community room about the time I showed up, and then we were at Forest Hills Elementary School, and then we had a Palm Sunday parade that led us up to what was the old number 10 green and a number 11 tee box of the longest golf course in the metro area, the Edenvale Golf Course. At Valley View and Mitchell, they're on the hill where you could then drive the ball over the PDQ store. Well, that wasn't there yet. We called it the Pretty Darn Quick Sermon Store. PDQ. Now it's the BP, which means Biblical People. And so we paraded with our Palm Sunday to there. We built 2 facilities there. And then after careful long-range planning and thinking, we outgrew the site and the space. And again, we went back to the schools on the relocation. We were at the Eden Prairie Performing Arts Center at the high school. We were at here in the city at the Garden Room for a whole year. And then we paraded with our donkey and our parade over to St. Andrew on Technology Drive at that Anderson, MTS Anderson farm site, we called it. And then finally another facility that we entered on Easter 2000, the turn of the millennium, exactly on schedule after a 10-year plan of long range to the day. So along the parade route, we were in 10 different locations, and many people helped us along in the theme of today, which is there's lots of people involved. And along the way, we established a congregation in Surprise, Arizona, and we established an inner city ministry in Northeast called Northeast Mercy Seat, and we established a St. Andrew West campus, and we established a church camp on Pleasant Lake near Hackensack, where I'm headed later this week for Easter. Can you imagine I'm going to the lake for Easter? It's unbelievable. Well, along that same time, nearly the same time, there was this priest, Father Tim Power, this unbelievable, amazing priest with a Catholic mission start called Pax Christi that was doing 5 weekend masses in spaces like a warehouse on 494 near Bush Lake Road, the Presbyterian Church, imagine the Catholics worshiping the Presbyterian Church, and then in the schools as well, until they built on Pioneer Trail, also known as the Fort Snelling-Nechaska Road there, and very close to where Elizabeth Fry Ellett named this town Eden in 1853. So history connected, and Father Tim brought a rich and creative spirit of ecumenism to the community with arms and doors just wide open, like could not have happened in any other place and with any other circumstances than with Father Tim. I'm absolutely convinced. We did everything together: weddings, baptisms together. We did celebrations and community worships together. But one of the things we did that was pretty amazing were what I would call large grief funerals. And I could share so many that just really pulled the community together. But I'll mention one, and that was the St. Andrew 9th grade newly confirmed Grant Hussey and Steve Eastburn, who died in a murder-suicide, the two of them. And how that came together was just an amazing experience of ministry and grief care. There were lots of other events, and what resulted was a wonderful Eden Prairie Ministerial Association in its organization, but also in the way we work together on lots of things. World Day of Prayer every Lent, community Thanksgiving service that still continues, that is now an interfaith, interreligious experience. I talk to pastors around the area in the Twin Cities and North Circle, my friends, and they can't believe that we do a service like that. That happens in Eden Prairie every year. And then the baccalaureate service there for the Eden Prairie High School graduates and their families gathered for the once-in-a-lifetime worship together that they do get to have in the gym at the high school that we paid for so that we could be all legitimate, and invitation people could come if they want or didn't. They didn't have to come. But they're underneath the banners with the praying eagle. Now I'm wearing my old sweater because I got the eagle on here, but all those banners up in the gym are the praying eagle, with the wings folded forward. And there's that eagle image praying over the life of our community school all the time. I love to share that kind of image. Now, a lot of things we did together additionally, I'll share more later because the time thing is so important here. Eden Prairie in Action Days, Eden Prairie EP Givers, EP Caregivers, job transition work, prop food shelf and emergency services, the Meals on Wheels and Bridging Incorporated, and just a whole list that we can talk about as we go along, tell more of their stories as we go. So there were small churches and regional churches that came and went like the Episcopalians and the Road Home Church, churches with name changes like Antioch to Life, and churches with a denomination in their name, and churches without, I count 5 that don't have a denomination anymore in their name. And now we've come to the time when we have destination churches like Wooddale and Grace. But you see, that's not a new thought, especially if you were walking in the olden days. What the future needs now is everyone a pioneer and everyone with some chosen local church as their weekly destination. And then we would be more than the #1 city to live and work in. We'd be the #1 city to live and work and worship in. Thank you.
Thank you, Rod. And now, Dean Edstrom.
Thank you, Roy. And thank you for inviting me to participate in this wonderful event. I was reflecting that practically all of the people in this room have been really part of the history we're trying to cover. And wonderful people that have been so great to work with over these years. It's been a real privilege to be in this community now for 40 and a half years. And Karen and I have enjoyed it a lot. As Roy mentioned, I started out in Glen Lake and used to ride my bike in the 1940s. So I go back quite a ways. And then when we moved out to Glencoe, we would go through Eden Prairie every time we came into the cities. And so once again, you know, went through this wonderful community. And those were the days when you came to the Flying Red Horse Y. And that was the beginning of the outlying area of the metropolitan area. Now, of course, we've been jumped over by Chanhassen and Shasta, but it's amazing how things have changed since those days. As Roy mentioned, my wife and I came back in 1973 from some sojourns in New York and Paris. And when we looked for a house here in the Twin Cities, we focused on Eden Prairie. Now, as Nancy mentioned, the population in 1974 is about 7,000. I've always said it was about 6,500 in 1973. I don't know if it was just a little bit bigger than 6,500. Think of it now, we're almost 65,000. But when we came into town, people would say, you live where? Eden Prairie? Is that by Mankato? that was really the reaction people gave me. But because it was relatively small, we immediately got acquainted with people all over town. And think about it, 36 square miles, 6,500 people, and we could just meet people from all over. And immediately got involved. First, in my case, the Chamber of Commerce, just a couple of months after we got here. And then I went on the School Facility Study Commission and got involved with the High School Building Committee, some city activities, the Rotary Club, Eden Prairie Foundation, and then Eden Prairie City Council in 1979 to 82. Because of that experience, you know, my focus today is going to be really the 70s and the 80s. The area, the period when I was probably most active in all these organizations. And so I won't refer too much to what went on before, and won't cover the last 25 years. But and it is amazing, it is 25 years since those 1980 years. But as I said, it's been a real privilege to work with people. Roy's asked me to focus on the City Council and the Rotary Club, which is quite a bit to cover. So I'll try to do that. In the late 60s and early 70s, the mayors were Paul Redpath, Dale Osterholt, Wolf Penzel, Gary Peterson, and I think you may know, a lot of you may know some of them. Wolf is still around, retired in Florida. We stay in touch with him. But these were really great leaders. Now, they didn't always agree on everything. Particularly Dave and Paul had some political differences, and you know they'd go at each other. In fact, we used to call city council meetings the Tuesday night fights sometimes. So it was interesting. But they were really great leaders in their particular respects. I want to mention some council people too. I'm trying to name as many names as I possibly can. Joan Myers was, I think, the first female on the Eden Prairie City Council. And I say city. It was a city back then. But as Pastor Rod mentioned, he used the word village. And Paul Redpath, over all those years, still referred to Eden Prairie as the village. He could never quite escape the terminology. And in some respects, it really was a village. You know, a village in the broader sense that we hear that, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, this village did extremely well in that regard, even though Minnesota statute said that you're a city, whether you like it or not. Billy Bye, many of you would know him. If you didn't know him personally, then you might remember that he is a Minnesota Gopher of great repute, and he's a real leader in this community, a great idea guy, and came up with some of the ideas for the things we're talking about today. So Billy was a good friend. It was really very shortly after we came to town that we got involved in his campaign for city council, and then he was one that really initially twisted my arm to run for city council to succeed him. Sidney Pauley. And Sidney's, you know, still, she and Roger, former attorney for the city, are still around down in Lake City area, Frontenac. And, you know, in many respects, I feel that maybe Sidney ought to be sitting here instead of me, because she goes back further and she knows where all the bones are buried far better than I do. George Tangen, George Bentley, Dick Anderson, a dear friend. There is a reason for the Richard T. Anderson conservation area down in the Bluffs. A great friend, a great conservationist, served nearly 12 years in the city council, succeeding me because I asked him to run after I was ready to leave the council. And you know, he was a better public servant than Dick Anderson. I mentioned Patricia Pidcock too. she really kept the city on its toes from time to time, and a lot of you, I don't know if Patricia's here, but staff, and I'm delighted to see how many of the staff, both, you know, current and former staff members are here. I think George Height, you knew George, I think, didn't you, Roy? I didn't really know him, but he was the city manager before we arrived. But Roger Olstad, and Roy knew Roger real well too, having worked for him back in Golden Valley, way, way, way back in my career. Roger Olstad was the city manager when I came on board on the city council, and wonderful guy, don't you know? Right? Yeah, he was a don't you know, it's terrific. And Carl Julie, the transition between Roger and Carl occurred while I was on the council. And Carl, having been city engineer, became the city manager. And you know, these three gentlemen were there at the beginning, as it were, in the early days of the city. I'm not going to mention those who succeeded at this point, but planning, Dick Putnam, Chris Enger is here. I haven't seen Chris for a long time. Chris, where are you out there? Anyway, say hi there, Chris Enger. And then he became city manager after his term as city planner. Park and Rec, Marty Jessen was the Park and Rec guy, succeeded by a fellow named Bob Lambert. Bob, where are you? I saw you in the back. There he is, Bob Lambert. I mean, between Marty and Bob, over a great many years, working with Dick Anderson when he was on the Park and Rec Commission, and Dick and the council when Dick went on the council, we put together a Park and Rec Commission that was literally the best in the nation. And I know I was checking with the staff to see if they could bring down the gold medal that we got in 1982 as a city, recognizing the city as having the best park and recreation program in the entire nation for cities of our size. And so we talk about, you know, being number one in the nation and things like that, according to current magazines and things. Hey, it goes way back. And, you know, you look at our park and recreation program, the parks, the trails. It's part of the fabric that has really made this community what it is. Police. Jack Hacking was the first member of the police department in Eden Prairie. I think Paul Redpath hired him, and he came from Hennepin County and started the police department. Brought on people like Keith Wall, Jim Clark. I don't know, Jim here, but you know, terrific people to run the police department. Ray Mitchell was a long time head of our fire department. And, you know, George, you worked with Ray, I think, way back in those days. George Jesperson, our current fire chief. Just terrific people. City Attorney Roger Pauly, Sydney's husband, was a great lawyer. Was selected by the council back just in the late 70s to become city attorney. And his firm, now represented by Rick Rossall, has been city attorney for the city for all of those years. So in any event, they all laid the groundwork for the city that we have. Among other things, most importantly perhaps, is the city comprehensive guide plan. The comprehensive guide plan was designed by Don Brower, who passed away just a little over a month ago. He's a great loss. But he basically laid out, you know, what was going to be where, all the various arterials. We had some of the major highways in place, but the arterials would connect everything, where the neighborhoods would be, where the parks would be, where the commercial areas would be. And in many respects, this started before I was even on the council, in many respects over the last 45 years, what we have been doing is filling in these spaces in Don Brower's guide plan. It's our guide plan. And we made a few amendments here and there, some changes and things, but basically the fabric, the map was there. And that's what Don and the then sitting councilman managed to do. In Park and Rec, I mentioned the National Gold Medal, but acquiring land was, you know, sometimes a very important thing. And I know the city extended itself financially to acquire some of this land. And you know, there are a couple of parcels we didn't get simply because we didn't have the money to do it. The community center, which of course is in the news today, we got that built when I was on the city council, and I look at it, you know, it was state of the art back in those days. And now, you know, I have to say that I really agree with the city's approach to refurbishing the swimming park, because it does need improvement for a city that's now, you know, 4 or 5 times as big as what it was. I mentioned police and fire. Southwest Transit is also something that came up when I was on the council. And I know Nancy was very active in the Southwest Transit board, and we've got a really nice transportation system out here that might not have existed if we didn't, focus on the fact that we could do it. Not everything has been sweetness and light, however, believe it or not. We have this thing called a landfill. In 1970, the landfill was supposed to be a great development for Eden Prairie. Hey, we had many jobs out here. This provided jobs, right? Well, after that, things turned a little bit sour. We had a fire in that thing. And as you can imagine, when I went out there, the city councilman, and looked into that fire, it was like looking into Dante's Inferno. Ran PVC pipe across the frozen ground in the middle of the winter to try to get water to that thing. If the water stopped, it would freeze, and it just had to keep pouring water into it. Backhoe would go into that thing, pull out some garbage that was burning. The oxygen would get down to that methane, and whoosh, there'd be this just explosion. It was very dangerous, and I have to say that, our fire and police people did a wonderful job, finally getting that thing under control. And then we had a proposal for a hazardous waste facility up there. And the hazardous waste proponents said, oh, this is going to be great for Eden Prairie, and there's no risk. And we were a little worried about maybe leachate in the ground and some hazardous materials. And the proponents ran into this gal named Sidney Pauley, who they sort of regarded as a little blonde housewife from Eden Prairie in tennis shoes. And they didn't know that she had a degree in geology from the University of Minnesota, and she tore them apart. It was really fun to watch. And then the landfill was going to be expanded. And the expansion of the landfill became pretty controversial, particularly for those people who live in Homeward Hills, south of the landfill. And Susan Varlamoff led those homeowners to, with the city, defeat the proposal to expand it, and finally got the thing shut down. So it's things like that have occurred on the Round Lake site. When I went on the city council, the city and the school district were in litigation, fighting each other in court. With our tax, we were paying both sides of that litigation, right? Over the site. Maybe Dave's going to say more about this, but the foresight was fantastic. The city and the schools agreed that this would be the site for the high school and a park, and in effect had joint rights to this site. The fight was over how to organize everything, and finally got resolved. We got sued over the Eden Prairie Center Tax Increment District, managed to win that one. So there have been things that occurred. A minute on Rotary. May I? Okay. Rotary, 2 clubs now, as Roy has said. We formed the AM Club in 1976. Don Brower, once again, the city planner, consultant, was an Edina Rotarian who helped get us organized. We call him our godfather, the AM Rotary Club. And John Wright from the Hopkins Club became our first president. They went out and recruited a bunch of people, including Roy and me, at least initially. And we had a dual problem back in those days. In 1976, we didn't have any restaurants in Eden Prairie, didn't have any place to eat. Roy went over to Hallmark in the Eden Prairie Center, and they agreed to allow us to meet for breakfast over there, and that's how we became the first breakfast club. We had asked Rotary International if it was possible to have a breakfast club because we didn't know of any other breakfast clubs, and they said, yeah, it's okay, so we did it. The club quickly got involved in various avenues of service: club service, community service, professional service, international service. We were committed to take a Rotary Exchange student from Bolivia before we even got our charter as a club, and we did a lot of youth exchange going back and forth over the years. There's a fellow named Håkan Torjussen who became a member of our Rotary Club, who was very connected. He and his wife were very connected in the medical circles internationally. We contributed to an effort led by them to reestablish a medical clinic in Uganda. At one point, there was a yellow truck running around Laos with an insignia on the side that said Eden Prairie Rotary Club. I mean, it's sort of incredible. And of course, Rotary has continued. I mean, both clubs have continued. As was mentioned, the second club was founded. Tom Thorfinson was one of the leaders of that. He was in the Hopkins Rotary Club, and he's not here. I know he's down in Omaha at the current time with Rotary, working for Rotary, and he would like to have been here, but that club has done very well as well.
I think that's probably where I better stop.
You can see there's no shortage of material here. Let's move right along to Gary McCoy. Come on up here.
All right, is that on? No? There. Hello.
Hello.
There you go.
Okay, well, a disclaimer. I heard there was no politics in education, that's why I went into it. One morning I woke up and found that Eden Prairie School District needed a superintendent. I was an assistant superintendent in Burteville, and decided, well, I'd apply for that job. 98 of us applied. And it was a little bit difficult to distinguish yourself from the other candidates, so I did a couple of things that helped me understand the district and the community before I got here. First of all, I got a book, and if you haven't read this, it's worth reading. Kathy Case probably has some back there for you, but this book will give you the history, first 100 years. Helen Anderson wrote this book, and it's a tremendous book in terms of what happened in the early days. The second thing I did, and I think it was probably one of the most important things I did, is I came and I bought 6 months of the Eden Prairie News and read it, found out what was going on in the community. So by the time I got to the school board, when they asked me questions, I knew more about the community than they did and wondered how that happened. Well, basically I wanted to learn about the community, and I actually fell in love with it before I got here. Although I came out to look for it and couldn't find it. I don't know where it is. And I said, I saw some buildings, but you can't get to them. So, that was kind of my introduction, but I really felt this would be a good place to raise my family. In the interview, and I'm not too worried about this interview because I have a job, and that's unusual in education when you're applying that you have a job. But I had a job, and I wasn't worried about getting another one. But Norm Frederick said to me, if we hire you, would you move to this community? I said, don't take this wrong, but before I came over here tonight, I put a for sale sign in my yard. Anyway, the rest is history.
That's the truth.
That's the truth. But in any event, when you read this book, you'll find that the early settlers had a really strong belief in education. This is so important to them. This was a unique area because it was a township, 36 square miles, that actually had a school district. And if you look around the other communities, you'll see the school boundaries are really goofy. But this is pretty contiguous with the city boundaries. So they were teaching their children in the 50s, they were teaching their children in the home. And then in the later 50s and early 60s, 1860s, they put in 4 elementary schools, 1-room schools, one in each of what they called the neighborhoods. They had neighborhood communities, and they had 4 schools. I think Wolf, Gould, Jared, and Anderson schools, they were each put in one of the quadrants that made this a school for that particular part of the community. Well, in about 1900, they started talking about consolidating the schools because you couldn't get much money. It cost a lot of money to run these little schools. They thought, well, we'll build a single school. And they came together in 1916 and voted to consolidate, first of all, which meant those 4 schools would be in one building. They decided to build a building. And the building that they chose to build now sits on Scenic Heights. It's the administration building. It was Central School. Interestingly enough, they had a vote on that. There were 150 voters. 124 were for the consolidation in the building, the bond referendum, and 25 were against. Well, they made a mistake because today when you set up a bond referendum, you have to identify where you're going to put the building, where you're going to spend the money. Well, they got $80,000 in their bond referendum with no site. So the school board chairman, Sheldon Douglas, he owned some property that he said he was going to give to the school district to build a new building, and that's where it ended up. But the Mitchell site, which was a flat site when you could actually get to, you didn't have to go uphill. Like if you go down the street, you'll see how hard it is to get to that site. That site, the Mitchell site, half the town wanted that, the other half wanted the Douglas site. So they had a vote, and the board said, this is it. We're going to go to the Douglas site. The community, to show you the obstinance early on, they started digging the foundation over on the Mitchell site. And they went to court. The board was sued, and the board won the case, and the site was identified as Douglas, and again, that's history now too. But that was an important part of what was happening here. There are a couple things I just want to mention. How did we get one high school? That's a story I like to blame on a lot of people. But I think the best way to describe it is, I made Royce's column one time. I made a lot of columns over the years, but Royce's was one that I was favored. Kurt Conity, I talked to them about the one school, and Royce said, well, you know, this school was formed because Mike Grant wanted one school so he could win all the football games. Kurt Conity said, that's not true. McCoy made that decision. He was the one who wanted the one school. And so in the paper, I read this column, and it says, penny pinching McCoy wouldn't put another school up. I thought that was the greatest compliment a superintendent could ever get. Money was important. That school, that $80,000 that they allegedly were spending for the new school, turned into 3 times that amount. This was one of the best schools. It was a fantastic school. They added on to it there, and then we went on, and when I came to town, and there's a little irony in this because I actually was hired as a consultant by the Eden Prairie superintendent before I came here, before I even knew anything about Eden Prairie. He wanted me to talk to the committee that was running the bond issue. They had failed the high school bond issue, and they wanted some help. So I came out, and I gave him my time, basically, and said, you know, these are the kinds of things you do. And I told Paul Redpath, they had a film there, and this Paul goes to school. He's standing on a corner, they're showing all this stuff. And I said, the first thing you have to do is get rid of that film. I said, and Paul, for years, he said, we got to sit down and really talk about this. This is pretty important. But they did pass the bond referendum. And then, ironically, I became superintendent, and then I had to deal with the board had gotten at cross purposes with the city council because they were aligning, rightly so, aligning Valley View Road along the lake. And the school district board wanted it on the other side. I think it was 76th Street or something. They wanted it over there. One of the first things we did with the community is we got them together to talk about the vision and the mission that they wanted for this community. We got 100 people, and we went to Wilson Learning. Each of our administrators were given a partner, a business partner, that they met with and worked with for each year so that they could see how business works. Because I always thought schools were a business. We weren't looked at it as business. But I said, don't you think $75 million makes a business? So we had these people going out to find out what businesses did to make their schools good. We got these 100 people together. We had the mayor, that was Gary Peterson at the time. We had board members, we had council members, we had community members. Many of you were there. We came up with a mission statement to promote the partnership. We spent 2 days together talking about that. We found this out about the community. They want 3 things in their schools. They really want to have quality schools. They want you to be fiscally responsible, and they want you to communicate. If you do those 3 things, everything else falls in place. The mission statement really talked about the partnership, the community partnership. And that was, for me, really the beginning of understanding how communities work. I joined the Rotary, the Lions. I'm still a member of the Lions, and the Lions they should be at this table as well, because they have done so much for this community in terms of supporting it. It's, well, George, I think they gave you the first fire truck, so that's a good example of what they did, what they've done over the years. In any event, this is a wonderful, wonderful community, and I think of all the things that are being said here today, you in this audience are the ones who really deserve it, because it really happens out here. We had 10 bond issues while I was here. Every one of them passed with the exception of 1/4 of one bond issue. And those, believe this or not, were athletic facilities. They never voted against any of the other options. So we are very fortunate. I was lucky the day I found Eden Prairie and retired in '96 and haven't really been happy since. But thank you very much.
And move right along here. We've given the last to you here, David, so you move through it quickly.
You get at the end. You get at the end, and you're crossing things off that you're going to talk about. But I have to just give my 2 cents worth on the colored brick. Just go over and stand someplace around Round Lake and look at the massive structures that are there and imagine them being one color. End of sentence. The 70s were kind of an end of an era and the beginning of another one. There was a time when Eden Prairie was so small that if someone came driving down your street looking for an address, you would say, "Don't bother me with the address, just tell me who you're looking for." Because it was easier to give them directions to that place than the street. And as Eden Prairie then grew, that is more difficult. There's people that I knew when my kids were in school here that still live in Eden Prairie, and you just don't see them unless you make a special effort to get hold of them. Just to tag on what Jerry did say about promote the partnership, it was, I think this is the thing that really made Eden Prairie, is that it was an effort to bring the employees of the school district, businesses, city, and community members together to make Eden Prairie a better place to live and work by better standing each other. And that's just a little expounding on that. How many people in this room know how the city got this building? Gee, there's more than I thought. I got to be careful what I say now. But, and I'm not sure of the exact date, but back in the mid-'80s, the city was leasing space in an office park over off of Valley View and Mitchell Road, and needed more space. They had tried a couple referendums, were turned down, and at the same time, the school district was looking for a place to start their early childhood program. And this has been going on for a couple of years and so forth. So at that same time, this building, which was the CPT building, was on the market. It had one tenant in it, which was C.H. Robinson, and they had a long-term lease for their corporate headquarters. So the city couldn't afford to do the building by themselves, so the mayor at the time, Doug Tempest, Carl Julie, who was the city manager, and Jerry and myself sat down and worked out a plan where the school district would lease space for, I don't know, was it 10,000? 10 years, $500,000. And then at the end of that lease, would have the space for $1 a year. And so the city got a city hall, and the school district had their early childhood area. So that's how this place came. It just didn't appear, or there wasn't a bond referendum that put the city in this. Taxes, yeah, we paid taxes for it, but that's kind of how we ended up here. My main thing here is just to talk about some of the programs that Service Corps and so forth have been involved in. But back in 1985, my wife and I were visiting UND and came across a bunch of kids that were crying and hugging and so forth in the lobby of one of the residence halls at UMD. And it was called PIP Fest, which stood for Partners in Prevention. And a PIP Fest was structured around skill groups or discussion groups in which 8 to 10 students and 2 adults dissect the subjects covered in large group discussions. Students learned about relationship building, healthy ways of expressing feelings, chemical dependency as a family disease, the art of listening and helping others solve problems, maintaining self-esteem, and prevention of chemical abuse. In the spring of '86, we had previously sent a group of people to Little Falls, home where Dr. Triggs did, because this is where Partners in Prevention started, was in the Little Falls school system. So we sent a group of people up there to learn more about it, and in the spring of '86, held our first PIP Fest in Eden Prairie that had 135 kids take part in the program. And how this gets involved in today is that it was a combination of the Eden Prairie churches, Eden Prairie Women of Today, the JCs, Rotary, Community Ed, and Eden Prairie merchants that worked together to make the program a success. That program is roughly 28 years old now, and during the years has gone like any program and made some changes and so forth. It's been called different things, from a PIP Fest to Prairie Fest to now it's a program in the middle school. It's one of 4 programs that the middle school offers the students, and goes by the name of Prairie Connection. During this time also in the late 70s and early 80s was really the legal formation of an awful lot of the athletic associations. I think the Hockey Association was probably the first one in 74, 75 that became a 501(c) nonprofit organization, and Don Opheim, who was a Lion, used to be a Rotarian, was very instrumental in its creation. And then soon after that, Basketball Association, the Football Association, and everything really became legal entities, and basically for the reason of being able to raise funds and attract corporate sponsors and so forth. And I think that these associations are really evident when you look at the high school, especially the new addition to the high school is the scoreboard, the new scoreboard that's up there. If you haven't seen that, you've got to go up there next fall. Or I don't know if they're going to be using it for track this year, but it can be used for lacrosse and soccer and football and a number of things. And really it's kind of the culmination, I think, of those facilities. The Booster Club, for example, in the mid 70s, the Booster Club was almost defunct, and the school board wanted to disband them. A number of people fought to keep it going, and each year it has continued to grow into what is today providing funds and support for extracurricular activities at the school district. During that period of time, much to the credit of a fellow by the name of George Sandell, who was a past president of the Eden Prairie Rotary Club, Rotary started the Golden Eagle program, which last year presented its 25th awards to deserving male and female students at the high school. Anyway, it's been great, and I think I had the shortest time, but I went over.
I think you can tell from just the difficulty everybody had trying to condense down into what was supposed to be 3 or 4 minutes by each person. But you can see what the difficulty is, because this community is just rich with so many things and so many programs that have come about. I can't help but think when people talk about this team effort in Eden Prairie, I always think of all the things that are here that you see, the schools and City Hall and the roads and everything, but there are those things that are underlying the community that you don't see. The things like prop that has been here for a long, long time. Here, I mean, this is one of the best examples you can think of for a community that's worked together through the leadership of Jerry Beckman early on for many, many years. Jerry, you deserve a lot of thank you. This type of partnership that we're talking about. We're fortunate to have the city and school district boundaries coterminous, which helps a lot. We're also very fortunate to have a community, a business community that's been very involved and along with the church community and the nonprofit community and the city and the school to bring this together into one thing that has, I think, we're just building on the shoulders of people who have come before, and hopefully people will continue on the leadership going forward. Just a point of personal privilege, if I could, Nancy said some nice things about me, but the person who's really been there all the time too, the wind beneath my wings has been Mary Lou, and she said it. She's the one that's covered the home front all these years, and as these volunteer things came along, and so I'm grateful for that. Nancy also mentioned the poem that I've been known to recite a time or two, and I will. I hadn't planned to, but since you mentioned that, I will, because it is so apropos, it seems to me, to this community and the type of gathering we have here now. And it's a poem that was called Builders, and I originally heard it in 1964 when I was at a meeting, and it was at that time attributed to Edgar Gist, although I've seen since that time someone else has got a kind of a similar one that they've used the name for, but it goes something like this. I watched them tearing a building down, a gang of men in a busy town. With ho, heave, ho, and a lusty yell, they swung a beam and a sidewall fell. I said to the foreman, are these as skilled as men you'd hire if you had to build? He looked at me and said, oh no indeed, just common labor is all we need. We can wreck in a day or two what it took the builders a year to do. So I said to myself as I went my way, which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who works with care, measuring life by rule and swear? Or am I a wrecker who walks my town, content with the labor of tearing down? This community is made up of builders, and I think that's what's made this type of a gathering so meaningful to me, is that we have people in this room who are builders, and many of them who aren't here that went before us that have been builders. And so to all of you who made these contributions, I want to say thank you to every club, the Lions, the Rotary, the Noon Rotary, the whole group of various organizations and churches and nonprofits, wherever they might be, prop shop. I think the plan is for me to turn this back to the mayor. We're going to have a short break, or we're just going to take your coffee break for those people that have to go on to, that aren't retired like some of us now. And then we'll continue to have coffee and mill around here and visit further. So thank you very, very much. It's been fun.